So welcome everyone to our Online Management Mastermind today. We're going to be talking about Keystone Conversations and unlocking effective communication with the phenomenal Jessica Schubert from Intact Teams. It's just not letting me do my thing at the moment. Oh, there we go. And always we like to acknowledge this country that we work, we live, we play, we celebrate, and pay our respects to all of our Indigenous elders, past, present, and emerging. I'm sorry if I'm going too quick, but we're going to get through this. I'm Leanne Jeffrey, so I'm the National Coordinator for Business Women Australia. And we work together with amazing people like Jess on co-creating your success and bringing these fantastic masterminds to everyone, with an amazing collective around Australia. And we always concentrate on these 5 areas of development. So we have leadership, which is part of our conversation today, business improvement, personal growth, influence and profile, and obviously connecting everyone. So we do run this through a membership. Without our members, we can't survive. And part of that membership, Lynn and I have introduced 2 new things to Business Women Australia now. So anyone who joins us, if you're a classic connector, you get 2 check-in planning sessions with Lynn and I. And then for our premium leaders, you also get 4 strategy sessions. So every quarter you can come in, use us as a sounding board, help plan your next quarter. And we always want to help people, grow and succeed. And by doing that, we need you to go through the website. Quick rundown, we've got a few cool events coming up. I've got a podcast, Untangling Love Insights from the Divorce Mastermind, which is Catherine Leach, and she's based in both Perth and Melbourne. In Perth, we've got Understanding Your Numbers, Decoding What They Mean for Your Business. So going through all your profit and loss and just how we can make it a little bit less scary with you. And that's with Stacey Payritz at Elgas. Another podcast on the 22nd of May, the 5 mistakes to avoid when leading change, with Tracy Cooper, who is a massive change specialist out in Brisbane. Sydney Chats is coming to you. So we've got a connection roundtable, Thriving for Success, with Martina Soldi from Microsoft. And the next day I'll be having an online mastermind with Martina again for the importance of data security in generative AI. And back in Perth, 30th of May, we have our Chats, Cheese and Wine with the beautiful Vita Carlino, Finding Freedom with Priority Self-Care. Now, Jess, I think that's the fastest I've ever gone through this. Please follow and connect with us. And I'm going to hand it over to Jess now. How quick was that?
That was really, really quick. Thank you, Leanne. If you've got any other questions, you obviously hear through the Business Women Australia Network, then let us know. But we also want to keep it short because there's a lot to learn, and we obviously promised you that you get a masterclass. So this is what you're going to get from us. So thank you very much for everyone who's dialing in. And if you are watching this as a recording now, then welcome as well. My name is Jessica Schubert. And if you are wondering about my last name, and there's a weird accent, I'm not from South Africa. Most people think I'm from South Africa, so that's absolutely fine. But I am originally from Germany. I have lived on this side of the planet for over 25 years now. So it's almost, this side of the planet, almost as long as I've spent in Germany. I've got a corporate background and lived and worked in New Zealand, Australia. I spent 6 years in Asia, so I spent 6 years in Hong Kong and Japan, and a corporate background in commercial real estate, in sales and business development. Estelle, we'll have a lot in common there. Worked a lot with marketing, Courtney, and so we'll get you to share what you're doing as well. But a corporate background in terms of engaging and influencing stakeholders, and certainly having to influence and lead my teams. And this is where I bring a lot of my work into what I do now, which is partly one-on-one coaching, team coaching, and leadership development, and of course my training as well. So I'm wearing sort of 2 hats today because I've got 2 parts to my business. One is Intact Teams that Leanne had introduced already, and at Intact Teams we work with organizations to develop leaders, and it could be one-on-one in teams. And we also design, facilitate cultural change programs where we really look at comprehensive transformational programs that really seep through the whole organization. So that's part of my business. And then in the last 2 or 3 years, I've taken on a business that's called Disc Flow. I'm the authorized partner in Australia. So I train people to become certified in using the Disc tool. And I'll go into that a little bit as well today. So I'm wearing both hats. Yeah, we're basing some of the learnings today and insights on Disc. But equally also, of course, I want to go into Keystone Conversations, which I often train and develop with people when I work in the business of in-tech teams. I've been involved with BWA for, gosh, 8 years now, I think. So just when I came back from Hong Kong, Lynn Hawkins, who's our national director, she contacted me on LinkedIn and she said, I think you'll be a good fit here. So I'm a member, but I'm also the head of leadership development. So I help bringing masterclasses, but also certifications like DISC. You can even become a coach through BWA to our community and platform. And I'm a shareholder as well. So I just love working with the team here with Leanne and Lynn, but it's also important because we work so closely together that over the years we had Keystone Conversations so we can bring more to our community here as well. It's going to be a whistle-stop tour, so similar to what Leanne already demonstrated this morning, because we have just under an hour. But it's quite interactive, and because we're a small group, we won't go into breakout rooms, but I will ask you questions, and you will be able to practice Keystone Conversations today as well. So here's what we're going to go into. We're going to do a quick check-in, and I want to know from you, what is your natural and most preferred communication style? Because that's going to build the basis for you to be able to have Keystone Conversations with people who are quite different. And it doesn't matter if you are leading a team, if you're working in an organization, because I know, Courtney, you're leading your own marketing organization or marketing agency, but having Keystone Conversations, even working on projects with clients, is going to be really helpful. I'll go into Keystone Conversations, and Leanne and I will have one. So we'll demonstrate it. Being able to appreciate the difference, because we have to have these conversations because we naturally have a different approach to how we approach work. Yeah, not all of us, but we will always have people where you go, oh, this person rubs me up the wrong way. So we'll look into this, and just some strategies for teams as well, if time allows. And of course, always time to answer questions as well. So my first question is, before we go into the different communication styles, can I just see a show of hands? And this is easy because I've got the 3 of you in front of me here. Who here has worked with DISC before, the behavioral tool DISC? Who's heard about it? Who's had a report? Who's worked with it? Yes. So Leanne has, yeah. Courtney, Estelle, Zoe, this is new to you. Or Courtney, you have done a little bit, yeah.
A little bit. I know a little bit about it.
Wonderful. Look, and we're not going to teach it in detail here now, but if you're interested after this, when you go like, actually, I want to know more, I want to do the assessment, just get in touch with me, because I certify people to be able to use this tool. Yeah. So what DISC is, DISC stands for what you can see here, the D-I-S-C, and it's a self-assessment on where you answer questions of what your preferred way of communicating and working with others is. And what that does is it helps you to understand that, especially when you're under pressure. Now, when we're under pressure, we default to like a natural style. Yeah. That helps you to understand why you do what you do and why other people do what they do. And I'm going to give you an example. So when I worked at Regis Business Centres, this was my career in commercial real estate. I was a business development manager. Yeah, so sales. I had to flip offices basically. Sometimes I say, when people say, "What did you do?" Yeah, I would have inquiries. I take people through the office space, and my remit was to close deals on the spot as much as possible and as fast as possible. So we had to be creative around, we had to be good at influencing people, of course, but we sometimes had to be creative around the deals as well. Now, of course, we had a pricing strategist, strategy manager, like you often find in organizations, where your commercial deals get approved. And this guy's name was Peter. And for the longest time when I worked there, I was here in Melbourne, he was in Sydney, I always said, Peter doesn't like me. And people are like, why do you say that? I'm like, because he's being difficult. Whenever I ask him for something and I need something quick, it's like he's digging his heels in. He hardly ever approves really what I want. Yeah, I always need extra explanations. Yeah, everything in the system has to be 100%, whereas my job is to get it done fast. So he doesn't like me, doesn't want to work with me. Now, we did a DISC assessment, and in my DISC assessment, I had a certain communication style. I'll show you what these different ones are. And turns out that I'm up here and he's down here. Now, and I'll show you what that means in a minute. Yeah, but of course, first of all, his remit was very different. Yeah, so his job was to keep the company safe. Yeah, so we couldn't just go out and we'll just give discounts and give them away. Yeah, he had to make sure that we tick the boxes and we do a job that reduces risk and the pricing doesn't go out the window. And of course, mine was so different because I had to be really people oriented, not so detail oriented, and I had to get stuff done. So once we had this conversation, we were in a workshop together because we were on the same level in leadership. We just looked at each other, and I said to him in the break, I'm like, oh my God, Peter, you're so different. And I understand your world a lot more now. And I understand that what you bring to the plate in terms of your behavior is really, really good for what your job is. And he's like, I know, but you're a bit crazy, Jess, but I also understand now better that what you do, right? And understand your pressure. And we really had, by default, a bit of a Keystone conversation. And and I said to him then after over a beer in the evening, I said, I always thought you don't like me. And he's like, no, I think you're fantastic. You just, you just do my head in because you're making my job harder. I'm like, you're making my job harder. So we had this heart to heart and we got along so much better. And what we did then is we agreed on how we would work together. Now, because the thing is, we have a different approach to the way we communicate and do things. Now, DISC is a really great tool to use because it's simple but not simplistic. And it basically categorizes the foundational behaviors into 4 categories. And it's people are either fast-paced, so these 2 behavior styles here are fast-paced, or more moderate-paced. And some people are more people-oriented and some people are more task-oriented. Now, this is not to put anyone into a box, but fact is that we have 1 or 2 natural behavior styles that are of a medium or high preference. The other thing that is really important is when we use DISC is it's just the start of a conversation. Yeah, the report gives you a narrative that sort of explains a little bit. I've just been through that again with Leanne and hers. I'm like, hey, does this still align with you? Here's probably how you see your world. And she's like, yeah, it was a really good refresher. Yeah, but we don't sum up a whole person on a piece of paper. But when you're working with people, it just gives you such great insights into why people do what they do. And then you can have, a conversation. Leanne actually just said before, she's like, oh my God, I just had that conversation with my son this morning. He's so different. Yeah. Also, each style, so these 4 styles all have strengths and challenges, and they're value neutral. There's no better style or worse style. Yeah. So the first one on the top left is someone who's fast-paced and task-oriented. And what you see them do is they probably come across, these are just behaviors, or communication styles. They're quite self-assured, they're decisive, they're efficient, they're competitive and goal-oriented, and they might be determined. Now, on the flip side, how they can be perceived as well is being pushy, impatient, and controlling. They might have a lack of consideration, especially for feelings and emotions, and they can come across like blunt, quite blunt. So someone who's decisive, efficient, and competitive makes a really good salesperson, right? Or someone who has decisions to make, that are fast, like a change manager, for example, But where their blind spots are might just be around here because they might be perceived as this, So think about, is this how, when you are under pressure, is this how you would communicate or behave? And you can, of course, have 2 as well. Then we've got fast-paced, but more on the people side. What you see, people are optimistic, enthusiastic. I call them the jazz hands people. They're persuasive. So again, in sales, this is something really good. Marketing often as well. People, collaborative. They want to work together. They're really sociable. But again, on the flip side, how people are seen here is sometimes can be disorganized and undisciplined. Yeah. Leanne and I call this like, oh, another shiny thing. Yeah. And I can say this with love and passion because this is my style. Sometimes they can be perceived as being manipulative, but also excitable and reactive. Yeah. And these can be challenges for people when you're working together. Now, when we go to the bottom right, yeah, this is moderate pace and people-oriented. It's called the steadiness style. Often what you see, people are dependable and supportive, persistent and agreeable. They're very cooperative. What we say here is that they don't even put themselves first, they put other people first. Yeah, often when you see people who work in the care industry or in sort of human resource related, yeah, it's not strictly by industry, of course, or job title, but it's really sort of, the caring and the steadiness here. On the flip side, they can be overly cautious, yeah, slow to change, maybe a little possessive, sort of, but we're going to think of everyone, conforming, and could be a little evasive because there is a avoidance of conflict. Now, just look at how these two styles are very different: self-assured, decisive, efficient, dependable, supportive, persistent, very different. Yeah, so the opposite styles is where you probably get the most clashes. You can already tell I've got a lot of this, yeah, and I've got a little bit of this red here as well, yeah, the D, which was really helpful as a salesperson. Now, Peter, accurate, analytical, diplomatic, conscientious, high standards, yeah, and perfect for his job. Yeah, very different to me. And the downside could be is, they're fault finding, and I found that he was trying to do that. Yeah, they can be judgmental because they are challenging the status quo. They might be indecisive. Now, because what's important is they make the right decision. So on the spot decisions, quite difficult, and they can be too skeptical and critical. When we say analysis paralysis, this is what could happen. When I said Peter would be digging his heels in, this is what I would be experiencing here. So what we then talked about was like, how can we leverage our strength and challenges, and how can we work together? And it was always in that situation where I needed a price approval on the spot, and he told me what he needs from me to speed up the process as much as he could, and we just had to have a conversation about this. So looking at this, what I'd like to know from you, and I'll go back to this slide again, but because we're only, 3 or 4 people in here, and Leanne, I might start with you and just a couple of sentences. Yeah. So your name, where you're dialing in from, you can tell us, of course, what you do as well, but also what is your communication style? Yeah. So just who are you? And when I go back to this, yeah, where do you find yourself? And I know, Leanne, your communication style from your disc, but what are the couple of things that stand out for you? What's your preferred style? And then we're going to do a round.
So being the national coordinator for BWA, one thing I am very much an IS. So I'm always, you talk to me and you've got an idea, I'm going to support you. I'm enthusiastic. I'm going to work with you as much as I can, and I'm going to help support you. And I love all that language. So I like people, I'm always people first, and I like when people are also direct with me though. Yes. So a D-type personality, I respond to well because they're clear and concise, and I've got no room for interpretation.
Yeah, and you need that for your work as well, right?
Yes.
So for a community manager, yeah, being optimistic, enthusiastic, but also supportive and cooperative. Yeah, perfect natural style for Leanne, but also Leanne and I have been working together for, I think, 2 years now together with Lynn. Yeah, there are a lot of conversations we needed to have of what we need from each other. Courtney, I'll go to you next. What do you think is your style? DISC, maybe a mix of a couple?
I definitely think I'm a blend of a few. Definitely a lot of D.
Yes.
I'm very decisive, very efficient. I am quite competitive, and very determined when I have clear goals and expectations. I'm also very analytical and diplomatic, and I have very high standards. But I also do like to work very collaboratively and supportively with my team. I like to empower the people I work with rather than micromanaging or telling them how to do things. I like to show them why. Yeah.
Yeah. What's easiest for you? Meaning, where do you have to spend the least energy in terms of behavior? Like, what comes to you straight away and you're like, that's super easy for me?
Analytical.
Analytical. Yeah.
And diplomatic.
Yeah, that's probably where your natural style sits, right? And that's where we say disc is a start of a conversation. And what you'll notice is that you probably find a lot of the other ones just around there as well. And it could be that, you know, you have a spider web that, you know, goes really sort of all around here. You know, when we look at, you know, when Leanne and I work together, yeah, she's definitely right on this side. Yeah. But working with direct people, and she needs that directness, is something that she's learned over time, and it's sort of a learned behavior. Yeah, the least amount of energy is definitely on this side, because we usually have sort of one or two, you know, which gives you also an indication of what, you know, high standards, you know, that analytical side. So when you look at the challenges that someone who's disorganized and excitable and shiny things. So if you have a client who goes, all right, Courtney, what now? And you're like, hold on, but we're like, you know, here's what the strategy, we're going to stick to. No, but we need to, like, I've just heard this on the radio and this is the next big thing, right? Where you're like, wow, like reining people in with the enthusiasm. I can imagine that, you know, I mean, that's difficult for anyone, right? But I know that for Leanne, you know, that's her big challenge with Lynn and I, because we're big picture thinkers, and she's like, hold on, I'm supporting you, but I also need you to be direct here, right? So it's all about that, finding out, you know, what the other person needs. Carl, thank you for sharing. Estelle, I go next to you. What do you think is your style? Just unmute yourself.
I think I'm kind of more in the C range, although I'm incredibly determined. So, and I do things efficiently, but when I think about it, and I guess for me, it's really easy to be collaborative and on that sociable side. But if I were thinking about my default, it's definitely in the C side.
Yeah.
And what I guess when you talked about what triggers you, yes, it's a little bit of both. It's the whole very disorganized people, but also the people who are, you know, extremely cautious.
Yes.
Bit. Yeah.
When there's like, there's no movement. And it's interesting, as you said, you're in business development. When I was a sales director in Asia, I mean, I was, you know, in sales here as well, and I led a team in Melbourne, but I had a really large team in Hong Kong. This is how I came to this work, because I, you know, did my coaching accreditation because I needed additional you know, skills and approaches for my team. And then I realized, actually, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. But people always said, like, oh, you know, salespeople and business development, it's all about being able to sell ice to an Eskimo and the talking. I'm like, no, it's not about that. My best salespeople were the ones who really worked really structured. Of course, they were good with people, but they followed the sales process. Yeah, they did their follow-ups. They were highly organized. They really knew their numbers as well. They had so much more of a compliance person, you know, combined, of course, with some of this, but it certainly wasn't your, you know, just a high I. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's again, it's you know, we don't sum up a person on paper, but, and what's interesting is that you say, like, actually being collaborative is really easy for me, but my default is here. Yeah. And it's just about being able to know that. Zoe, what do you do and what's your communication style?
So I'm a sales manager for an ingredients company across Australia and New Zealand. I've been in the food industry 25 years.
Yeah.
So my communication style would be a combination of D and I. So I feel I'm very collaborative and sociable and efficient and determined. So a mix of the two.
Mix of the two. Yeah, wonderful. So I'm exactly the same, Zoe. Yeah, I'm oops, sorry, just gonna go back here. I'm a DI, and I used to, and it changes a bit as well. Leanne just asked me someone, do you think it changes? Yeah, it shifts depending on our context. So I was a high D when I was just in sales years ago in the 90s, and then I moved more into I when I was just working with people, and because I run my own business, I've got a bit of both. Yeah. But it was so obvious when I worked in sales and I was, sort of up here, these two, that I found it really difficult with someone who was high level, accurate, analytical, and diplomatic. Yeah. And even someone who, had these behaviors of, agreeable, cooperative, conformant, because it just wasn't fast enough for me. And this is what happens when we thank you so much for sharing, Zoe, that when we work together, and why we do encounter friction in relationships, when there's misunderstandings, when there's maybe even conflict in teams, and if there's more than 2 people involved, so if you have a whole team, it can actually come to still stand, or frustrations when we work together in teams or in pairs. Because most people, even when there's say a fairly even distribution of disc, 75% of people don't see the world as you do, because we've got 4 styles. Now, of course, you could be in a team and everyone is of the same style. What that means is that you might have, as a team, you might have a blind spot, right? But if you had a DISNC in your team, so you have a CEO, a COO, a CFO, and a CHRO, which really sort of represents this in terms of archetypes, then what happens is we're so different and they don't see the world as we do. Now, when there's no pressure, when things are, we've got time and numbers are well and we're achieving our goals, what we find is it doesn't matter if we're so different, because we've got time and we're relaxed. People use their learned behavior really well. But what you see is when people are under pressure, when things are not going well, or when there's high expectations or the team is underperforming, and this is where I'm often brought in. And they're like, oh, they're underperforming and there's no engagement and there's conflict, or conflict in terms of, people are digging in their heels. And then when I observe teams, what I notice is that they have no consideration for being different. And what we then often notice is, and what we hear and see is, that things get heated. People are saying, it wasn't my fault. Why would you react in that way? This is what comes up in conflict often. I'm going to tell them what's what. It could be something. I don't like you even. So this is some of the outcomes, and hopefully no one looks like this lady on this on this photo and this image here. But what we find is the outcome is what we call our communication breakdown. So people don't interact in a way that's actually conducive to the outcome. People react in the way that's most natural to them. So think about the challenges you had in that right-hand column, that people dig in their heels, so they become overly decisive, and they're like, I don't care what you guys think, here's what we need to do. Or I'm someone so high, we overcompensate by just enthusiasm. We're like, let's do something lovely. Or we can be sort of a bit of a pushover. So when this happens, what I'm interested in is to know from you, when there is a breakdown, when it comes to outcomes of team communication breakdowns, what do you notice? Maybe in your own team, or when you work with other teams, what's happening when there's communication breakdowns? What are the outcomes? Just unmute yourself of what you're experiencing, maybe in your own team, or what you've seen in other teams.
People get very emotional.
Yes. So we've seen overdrive of emotion. And the thing is, Zoe, the emotions can be different depending on who displays the emotion. So when we look back at DISC, so sort of the top left, if the diagonal is like this, sort of D, DI, and DC styles, what you see is what they overpower is what calls red anger. So you see, shouting or being really, really brash. Where's the styles on the other side? So SSI, what you see is what we call white anger, passive aggressive, digging heels in. I find it really difficult to deal with people who, sort of, they withdraw from conflict. Really hard to detect, just as unhelpful as people being, too direct. So and a display of emotions. What else, Estelle? You've put yourself on mute. What do you see when it comes to communication breakdown?
Well, people go quiet.
Yes. People can become really quiet. So that's what I was just describing, and what we call...
They don't engage.
They don't engage, just as unhelpful. It's just harder to detect, though, because you have that digging in of heels and stuff like that. Yeah. So communication breakdown, yeah, lack of engagement, overly emotional. Courtney, anything that you've seen when you work with your team and there's breakdown, what happens? What are the impacts?
There can be some frustration, and because everyone deals with stress differently, some people go inwards and some go outwards. So that can be really challenging to mitigate.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So really hard to mitigate. And what we see is, so when I'm being brought into working with teams is when there's underperformance. Yeah. Communication breakdown, lack of engagement has a direct impact on the performance of a team, at least long term. Not saying a team can't compensate on, not getting along so well, but often that is due to individual performance. But if you want to create a high performance team, yeah, we need to make sure that communication breakdowns happen, but how can we recover from them? How can we invite and allow conflict to an extent where we can resolve it quickly? The thing is, we leave it to chance quite often. Yeah, in one-on-one relationships or in relationships and team communication, often we go, yeah, we will see how we go. No. So when we look at how do we communicate? Yeah, channels of communication. And I'm leaning here on the really great work of a guy called Michael Bungi Stania, and he calls himself MBS. I'll show it here, yeah, because his name is a handful. Maybe Leanne, I'll get you to just search and search this book and pop a link of this book, How to Work with Almost Anyone. MBS, yeah, and pop that in the chat because he goes into a lot of detail. For him, it's more about relationships. I think this definitely works with, with communications as well, because what we do is we leave it to chance. So whilst, here we're focusing on communication and relationships, he does mostly relationships. So here's some of the ways we communicate. So of course we have one-on-ones, yeah, that's with clients, that's with team members or in project teams, but also emails. Email communication is always underestimated in terms of how we need to adjust our own key email communication to someone else's style to be able to influence them. There's Teams and Slack messages. So this is short messaging. And again, I don't think people do this overly well. There could even be town halls. Of course, there's strat meetings and team meetings. And team meetings could be, a weekly whip meeting, but also huddles. So these are some of just the different ways to communicate and the channels, because again, I'm being brought in and they're like, hey, can you help with our communication? I'm like, well, where does it go wrong? Which ones? Yeah. And it's usually all of them. And what really helps is to have Keystone conversations about all of these channels of communication and conversation. And what are Keystone conversations? So MBS says that too often, it's a matter and a case of fingers crossed. Yeah, we leave it to chance, or let's see how we go when it comes to working together. And I hear this all the time. And people say, this is how we've always done it. Yeah, you're new in our team. We'll show you how it's done. We don't actually agree on it. And whilst, MBS here really relates to relationships, I think you can have Keystone conversations in relation to all of these ways of communication. So when you go back to the slide we just had on the negative impact, or the conversation we just had, what's the negative impact? Yeah, some of you said it can be really frustrating, lack of engagement, people dig in their heels, or they're becoming overly frustrating. This is what happens when we communicate differently, and we just figured out all of us are actually quite different. So think about when it is effective, where different communication styles are valued and they're managed well. Yeah, that's when people feel actually valued. And here's how you do this. So Keystone conversations create psychologically safe and brave spaces. And psychological safety, I think, is the word of the year. Everyone who I work with, organizations and teams, go, we need to do some work. And I call them brave spaces because I think being psychologically safe has been stretched a little bit. Yeah, I now hear people going like, oh, you can't give me feedback in this way. I don't feel psychologically safe, almost like a little bit of an excuse. But of course, brave spaces is where people speak up, bring in ideas, brainstorm, point out mistakes, ask for help. Keystone Conversations tackle the how before the what. When I go into project groups in particular, all they talk about is how are we going to solve this problem. I'm like, no, what is here to solve and how are we going to solve it? But how they have the conversation is not happening. Yeah, so we need to have the how before the what, and a conversation really about, so how are we going to work together? Now, a keystone really locks the whole together, and a keystone conversation is about curiosity and agreement. So a keystone conversation is having an intention and an intent to talk about, how do you tick? What works for you? How do I get the best out of you? Here's how I want to work. And it's interesting because when I started having these conversations, my partner is a global head of engineering in a large engineering firm. So he has got massive projects and always other people, key stakeholders included in these. And I asked him the other day, I'm like, how do you have keystone conversations? And he's like, what is it? And he does actually have them. He just didn't know that was the word. So when he starts a new project, he always goes around the room, especially if it's one-on-one, but even in these project groups, he's like, how do you guys work? Here's how I work. He's got a very particular way. Yeah, he's a DC and D first, yeah, and it can really rub people up the wrong way. So he wants to know who's in the room, how people prefer to communicate, and then being able to agreeing on to communicate. So what MBS says in his book, yeah, there's 5 questions you should ask in a keystone conversation. But I think you can make this your own. And you're like, what does it mean for me when I work with my team? What are the 3 or 4 or 5 questions that I need to ask? So you can, of course, lean on his wisdom. But I think when it comes to communication, and Leanne and I will just demonstrate this very briefly. Considering your disc and communication style, so we just had that conversation, yeah. If you ask of each other the question, how would you describe your communication style? Now, so you've already, you notice, oh yeah, I'm probably up here and up here, but how would you describe it? When working together, what kind of communication works best for you? And which behaviors in one-on-ones or team meetings rub you up the wrong way? So basically what's not working. And with that, how will we work best together? And it's interesting because when Lynn, who's our director at BWA, started working together, we had this conversation. We all had our disc report. And then Leanne, Lynn, and I had this conversation as well, because we are actually all quite different. We have a lot in common, but we're also different. So I'm going to do a quick demo how Leanne and I, we just did this before. So Leanne, obviously you're the community manager, and you do a lot of work in the background. You really support me. And I'm here, my remit is to help grow the L&D part of BWA. What I would like to know is, how would you describe your communication style?
I always communicate with a people-first approach, and I like to be open and transparent. So I would like to know anything that you're thinking, and I don't want you to kind of hide away any information that might be viable for me.
Fantastic. So that works really well for me because, Leanne, I'm a big picture thinker, and I'm fast and enthusiastic. Yeah, so I'm a bit of a D and an I, but yeah, my blind spot is I can get distracted, and you've seen me do this, right? Where I go off with the horses, and I forget what's actually at play here and what we need to do. Yeah, so I think there's something in there that we can support each other. When working together, what kind of communication works then best for you, Leanne?
Directness.
Right.
I get lost in the detail.
Right.
So I need you to be direct and tell me what you want me to focus on.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's going to be a bit of a mud puddle for me. And
Yes.
yourself?
Yeah, that's really good. So I am direct, so I can help you with that. What really works best for me is an open discussion and ideas. So whilst I really love that you rein me in and you want directness from me, I need some space to be able to discuss ideas. I'm a true extrovert, so I have ideas as we speak out loud. So in our fortnightly meetings or monthly meetings, if you can give me some space to really brainstorm, before you rein me in, that's really going to help me. But also really, keeping things on the straight and narrow, because my blind spot is that shiny thing. That's great. What doesn't work for you? What rubs you up the wrong way, or what really frustrates you in communication in general?
Defensiveness. It don't need to be argumentative. If you need to, I don't need to know why you couldn't do something, or, I don't need the pushback. What I need to know from you is, how can I help? Or what do you need? So the defensiveness and the brick walls makes me defensive as well.
Great. Yeah. And I'll probably have to watch out for that a little bit. So that's really good to know. What doesn't work for me is when people withdraw. Yeah, it probably goes in the same direction, actually, when, there is a bit of, what is perceived a conflict, and then they're just, they're not part of the conversation anymore, because I find it then really difficult to get something out of it. So we can probably help each other to just drop our egos and just, deal with, what's happening as it is. So how will we work best together? What are the couple of things that we can agree on, Leanne?
I think we could agree on an open style communication. Take the lid off while you're getting your creation on, and then reining it in once you've got your ideas out, so we can narrow our focus a little bit.
Great. I love this. That works for me. And what I'm asking for you is, because I sometimes forget, when you need that direct feedback and you're like, but hold on, reining in, but also that direct feedback, that just ask that of me. But because for me, it's like, I just simply forget, rather than, mean it in any way, really.
Beautiful.
Sounds great.
Sounds
all right.
great.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was a Keystone conversation. Yeah, you don't have to use these questions, of course. Yeah, I just wanted to make this about the work we've already done about communication style and DISC. Yeah, but think about, if you are working on a project with someone, what are the questions you need to ask your team member, your client, your stakeholder? There might be an outside person that's involved. So how to you could even ask something like, here's how you get the best out of me. How do I get the best out of you? Yeah, when it comes to email conversations or our WIP meeting, how much detail do you need? Here's how, I think someone just said, Zoe, I think you said, like, oh my God, over analytical, that just does my head in. So if you work with someone who's over analytical, and really detail oriented, how can you work with them so it works? What do they need from you in terms of, information that works? But it's about having the conversation around this and being really overt. Does that make sense?
That's the question.
Yes, of course.
I mean, that was a great role play, but you ladies are very self-aware, and you've done this before, and you know your needs. But what do you do when you're dealing with people who don't have that self-awareness, or are very stuck in their ways? Do you give them these questions in advance to sort of think about, to try and help improve the working relationship? Or
I
don't know.
It's probably creating the awareness first. Now, I understand, Zoe, that with some people, you don't have influence over that because there might be key stakeholders somewhere else. If this is about your team,
in your team,
I recommend to do a bit of a DISC-based workshop. Maybe a half day in your next sort of leadership development stuff you do with them, or a team offsite or whatever, and I can help with that.
Okay.
Where everyone gets their DISC report, and we do that work that we did in a whistle stop tour.
Okay.
Really work out, through activities, what's each other's styles, and how do you use that now to be able to lean into someone else? Do you remember when I said Peter and I were in this workshop? This is where it all clicked for us. So then, we could have that conversation going forward. And the more you do that with people around you, the more awareness is there.
Okay. Something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Who else has a question about Keystone Conversations? Leanne?
I do have one. And so leading a few of the community groups here now, what do you do? So when I'm conducting when I'm president of association, when I'm conducting a meeting and suddenly there's a lot of different people in the community there that I don't know, and I don't have time to get to know them, my thing is I will lead a conversation with, if you've got questions, I need you to ask them directly. So I'll actually tell them how I need it from them, but I never quite consider how to understand them in a way, because I don't have time.
That's a really good question. And this is, again, you don't have the opportunity to agree with everyone around you on, you know, here's how you best work with me, right? And of course, you can be direct with a stakeholder, like a community member, and go like, hey, I need you to be really direct. Just tell me what I need. And they might go like, sure. And they're like, yeah, that's never going to happen because I can't be direct. You know, I need, you know, warming up and, you know, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. We can't expect from people to always, you know, just lean into us. Your job probably is, Leanne, to meet them where they're at as well. Yeah. And either have a mini conversation around it or just lean into their style and ask them. Yeah. You're like, look, my preference is you're really direct with me and tell me what I need, but I don't know how that works for you. Yeah. You're obviously time poor as well. You don't have much time with them. But, you know, it's, and again, the work you've done around DISC, Leanne, it's then about becoming a people detective with that DISC, you know, sort of the foundations, you know. So for example, going to the next, I'll go to this slide because we won't have time to practice the Keystone Conversation. So I'll get you to practice in your own time, please. Yes. If someone wants to practice with me, of course, right? See here are the 4 DISC styles again. Yeah. And it is probably if you have to influence stakeholders all the time, it might be helpful. Yeah, and that's what you were asking, like, well, you're all self-aware, right? Do some training using the fundamentals and foundations of DISC to be able to become a bit of a people detective. Yeah. And I can't teach you this in this whistle stop tour here, but you know, this is the training we provide. But when you look at, you know, like appreciating the difference. Yeah. So the top left, that red, yeah, the dominance, what that motivates them in the way they work. They're keen to get results. Yeah. But they're also willing to stay the unpopular positions, might not consider others. They love challenges and they're driven. Yeah. Friendly, outgoing, and so on and so forth. You see the different motivators for each of these styles. And this might help you, Leanne, to have a little bit of a shorter way of, so you know that, you know, you're a little bit here and definitely a lot on this side. Yeah. So you're an IS. Yeah. But you also really like that directness, and that's because it's your remit. So it depends on how, you know, your member works and how they work. They might not be able to be direct. And then you have to deal with that. And you might have to create a couple of meetings for them. But it's about that initial conversation. Go like, hey, we're obviously working together. I'm your, you know, community manager. Here's how I'd like to work, but I understand you might be different. Yeah, what's your, you know, ask a couple of questions, how they would like to interact with you. Yeah, we'll make these slides available to you because this next one is great as well. Whoops, I'm completely all over the shop. Here's where I wanted to go, sorry. Here are the 4 DISC styles, yeah, D, I, S, and C. When it comes to, these are some strategies, and take a photo of that or screenshot if you want as well. When it comes to body language, tone, pace, pitch of voice, words, and contact, on how to lean in. So this is about what can you do if you are coming across and working with someone who is DIS or C style. This comes from Arabian, where he says, you know, 55% is body language, 38% is tone of voice, and 7% is words, in terms of how, you know, what is used to be able to influence other people. I don't believe in these numbers strictly. I think it's, you know, a combination of all, but it gives you a really good idea of when you're dealing with someone who's, you know, has dominant style. Yeah. So keep your distance. Yeah. So it's not about hugging. Yeah. But you can come close. So don't mind being confrontation. Strong handshake, lean forward, direct eye contact. It's all that conviction. Yeah. You got to come up with conviction, not like, you know, sort of super shy. And we have to get out of our comfort zone about this, right? C, keep your distance. Yeah. Stand or sit, firm posture, direct eye contact, but controlled gestures. Yeah. So it's more about the facts and being really objective. Yeah. S is relaxed and warm and being able to create harmony. And I is all around, like, you know, ask them how their day was and let them talk about their feelings. Yeah. So it's about, you know, enthusiasm and collaboration. Let's do this together. So each style needs a different approach. And here's just some of the tactics that we use. But Zoe, to your question before, this is the kind of stuff we would workshop out in a workshop. So everyone has strategies on how to adjust their own style and lean into others. And then what really helps is having that Keystone conversation. I'm just going to look at the chat. Aaron, yeah, she dialed in and then dialed out, missed most of it, which is absolutely fine. I'm just going to stop sharing here because we've got about 5 minutes left. And I would like to ask you, what questions do you have for me? And I'm also curious to know from you, share with us, how do you see yourself using the difference in behavior styles and certainly the Keystone Conversations in your business? And I'd love to hear from everyone. Courtney, what's come up for you? How are you going to be able to use this?
I think it's all been really valuable, and thank you so much for your time and running through this. The last few months, like I'm quite new to running my own business. So the last few months I've been doing a lot of self-work with discovering my communication style, my strengths and my weaknesses. Because obviously going from being a team member to a team leader, there's a lot of change you need to make within yourself to make sure that you're an effective leader. So everything that you've described here, I find really interesting, and I've actually noted down a few things for me to research after our call, and I'm very interested in that book actually.
Yeah, this one is great. Yeah.
But I think it was brought up earlier. A lot of the difficulty is communicating with people that aren't so self-aware and that are still very much inside their own heads, and may take a lot of different communication styles negatively because they don't have that full understanding that everyone's so different in all aspects, communication included. So I'll be interested to hear a little bit more about how you navigate communication with people who just aren't self-aware at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Happy to have a follow-up conversation as well if you Courtney, and see what helps, certainly with your team, as Zoe and I just discussed. Like with your team, you have influence over it because you can bring the disc work in, but you might have clients or stakeholders where and we're not saying, because that's why I said disc is a startup conversation, it doesn't change everything, but it's so helpful when I notice when I work with someone, I'm like, yeah, they're super analytic. I can already tell, like I worked with people who wanted offices, then I worked with academics, and I had to change my like, hey, I'm Jessica, with a handout to like, right, okay, I'll get it, I'm working with academics here. This is a very different approach. Yeah. So it's, it helps you to adjust your approach. It doesn't solve everything. Estelle, how are you going to use this, you think?
Well, no, I thought that was really interesting. I think I've changed also a little bit my thinking as to my style, because what I thought was my style, I'm going like, that would really put me not work for me. So I kind of went, no, that can't be my style. So but that's good. But I thought I tend to, when I work with projects and start with projects, I do tend to have that conversation about how we work together and so on, either as a team or with a sponsor or so on. But it's given me other ideas as to, sort of follow-up questions as to what I can do to dig a bit deeper into that.
Great. Amazing. Thank you, Estelle. And sorry, last but not least.
Yeah, no, great session. Thank you, Jessica. Just got me thinking about, how we can apply this in my work. We're a small team with a lot of different personalities. Meetings sometimes get a bit heated, and so it's good to use when I start practicing this, and I think share it with the broader team and start practicing how we communicate and being aware of each other's styles. And you mentioned something important about how you recover from communication breakdowns. I don't think we've done that well either. So there's a lot to do and put in practice. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoe. And there's someone with just a 729, not a name. Can you unmute yourself and say hi? We don't know who you are. What did you catch from today? All right, I don't know who this is, so we'll just leave it. Leanne, I'm going to get you to close the session, but I want to say thank you very much if you watch the recording. And of course, thank you, ladies, for your engagement here. I hope this was helpful to understand that, diversity really works when we're inclusive. And this is not just, gender and culture. This is also different behavior styles, and creating the awareness, our own awareness, helping others to create the awareness, and then have Keystone Conversations on how we work together all of the time or more often than we do now is really helpful. Leanne, I'll let you close the session.
Thanks so much, Jess, for all your time as always. You're such a strong advocate for BWA. But one of the best things about it is in the calendar link, I have put everyone's name. So please make sure you reach out to one another, because this is, connection is such a valuable point. And also to know that we can bounce off each other with ideas. So I'm just going to stop the recording, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I will send out this recording to you as well. So you're welcome to share it with your teams, and along with how to contact Jess if Jess hasn't already sent out her contact details. Thanks, everyone.